Well, the Indianapolis Colts just got great news on one of their most underrated players who's established to one of the most dominant units in all of football. All that and more on this episode of Sports Talk Indy. What's going on? I'm Elijah from Sports Talk Indy, where we cover all things Colts every single day. And today we're going to talk about some of the best news that the Colts have gotten this offseason, and it may come from a place that you don't often think. The Colts just got great news on offensive tackle Braden Smith. And you might not think that's a huge deal, but Braden Smith has been one of the most dominant in his position and attributed to one of the best units in football. The 2024 NFL kickoff is inching closer every day, and the Colts are preparing for a bounce-back season after missing the playoffs the previous year. And this comes with some positive news. The Colts offensive tackle Braden Smith is coming off of a knee surgery. Now, Braden Smith played 10 games last season and missed, and did not allow a single sack while playing the offensive tackle or left tackle position. Braden Smith is entering his 7th year in the league. The lifelong Colt suffered a knee injury late last season, but is trending upwards so far this spring. He said this, "I feel like I'm in a pretty good spot. My strength's coming back, just making sure I can get to the season healthy and make sure we're being smart with things." Now, we know that the Colts drafted 2 offensive linemen. Both of them can play at multiple positions. Sitting at right tackle, I said left tackle a minute ago, I meant right tackle. Sitting at right tackle, Smith allowed 0 sacks through 10 games last season despite not being at 100%. A lingering left knee injury derailed a strong season, though Smith has reported that he is in a better spot than last year. I think that's incredibly encouraging. Pro Football Focus has ranked the Colts year in and year out, and the Colts offensive line struggled the year before last. Obviously, everyone struggled. That was just a season. We keep bringing it up because I think it's important to understand where we are now versus where we were. But I think that we look at this and say, this is a really good spot for the Colts to be in. And we go on continue the report. To show how big of an impact Smith has made on the Colts line, you simply look at the numbers. In the 9 games he played, the most, Indy allowed just 15 sacks. In the 8 games he missed, the team allowed 26 sacks. It'll be important to provide a second-year quarterback, Anthony Richardson, with some elite protection, especially, let's pause this for a second, especially from that right side. I think it's so important. It's important from both sides. You got your blind side, but you also got the right side. And when you see Anthony Richardson and some of the rollouts he made, and the rollout, let's talk about the rollout that he got injured on, was on that right side. This 15 sacks through 9 games that Braden Smith played, that was the lowest in the NFL. That was incredible numbers. And obviously they still did somewhat well without him. And again, they added some depth to this offensive line, which I think is incredibly important. But it's going to be important for Anthony Richardson to get some elite protection, and the QB1 looks to lead his team to the playoffs the first time in 4 years. That's unnecessary. We don't need to keep talking about the playoff drought, okay? But let's go to this offensive line, because I think it's incredibly important to know where this offensive line is and where it's going. The Indianapolis Colts offensive line seemed to have found its identity as a bullying unit once again, and Pro Football Focus has placed them among the elites in their latest ranking. Finalizing the offensive line ranking from 2023 season, the Colts came in at number 3 at the end of the campaign. They slotted right behind Philadelphia Eagles and the Detroit Lions. And the Philadelphia Eagles, they obviously lost their center in Jason Kelsey, so I would assume that they would even be better. But the best lineup the Colts ran was Bernard Raymond, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, and Braden Smith. And again, they added even more depth to this. So there's a good possibility that Fries will get subbed out. There's a good possibility that Raymond. We'll see how the season plays off. Offensive linemen are also really good. Sometimes you don't see a rookie offensive lineman out there every snap. So I think it'll be really, really important to see. But also Ryan Kelly's in the last year of his deal. And so if one of the 2 offensive linemen that we drafted can switch over to center. But we'll go on. Injuries to center Ryan Kelly and right tackle Braden Smith weakened this unit. But when the Colts played all 5 of their starting offensive linemen, like in the first half against the Texans in Week 18, it was one of the best and most improved front 5s in the NFL. The Colts offensive line allowed just 15 sacks all season, the 3rd fewest in the NFL. And their best player was Bernard Raymond. So I said Raymond I don't think Raymond's going to get subbed. Raymond was one of the best breakout players of the 2023 NFL season, ranking 5th among left tackles in PFF overall grade at 82.3. I think that the Colts are finally starting to find their stride in their identity in having a good offensive line. And this has been something that the Colts have been for a long time. I think that you saw, obviously there was the time with Andrew Luck where they weren't a great offensive line unit. Clearly, I mean, the dude was injured all the time. So I think that once they started putting an effort into a good offensive line, you remember Anthony Costanzo, who didn't have a Pro Bowl, but he was a very, very good offensive lineman. And then obviously drafting Quentin Nelson in the first round, and really improving, and Ryan Kelly and all of these guys that they've really like grown into. They've brought in a few offensive linemen a few times, but I really think that their identity has been in growing these offensive linemen, getting these big old corn-fed Indiana, get the boys in Indiana, get them big and bulky. I think that's really important for the Colts. And I think that when you look at Anthony Richardson, we talk about the wide receiver room, we talk about the running back room, we talk about tight ends, we talk about defense, we talk about all that. And I don't think enough emphasis is being put on how good this offensive line is and needs to continue to be in order for Anthony Richardson's success and Jonathan Taylor's success. When the offensive line was not performing well, Jonathan Taylor wasn't performing well. I mean, that's just the two go hand in hand. You can have the best running back in the league with a poor offensive line, and he's not going to be the best running back in the league. I think you can fundamentally say that. But the same thing goes for, you can have the best quarterback in the league with a bad offensive line. We saw that. We saw what Andrew Luck looked like with a bad offensive line. He didn't look like the best quarterback in the league. Now, some quarterbacks, you got like Mahomes and stuff, he has a good offensive line, but you get guys who can be playmakers, and we think Anthony Richardson has that gene in him, which is great. But you got to look at what's going to make it easier for a quarterback to develop, a running back to develop, than a good offensive line. And this goes into, after a few seasons of mediocre poor play from the offensive line, the unit stepped it up big time during the first season under head coach Shane Steichen and new offensive line coach Tony Sparano. Sorry, Red Soprano. The latter deserves a lot of credit for turning the unit around where they were just 1 year ago, and it helps that Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly found their forms as tone setters on the interior. I think our offensive line is always going to be defined by those two, at least for this season, until they move on. But I think like Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly are the fundamental of our offensive line. But you also look at guys like Braden Smith, who's 28 years old, is his 7th season in the NFL, and just has the opportunity to be incredible and to be tone setters. And I'm really excited to see where this offensive line goes, because this is the 3rd year now with most of these guys. And the chemistry, that's another big thing that I don't think gets talked about enough, is the chemistry on the offensive line. You have to know every single spot. You have to know every single gap. You have to know every single where this guy's going. You pass off defenders, all of that stuff. And I think that as this offensive line goes, Tony Sparano, as he continues to work his magic and redevelop these guys, and again, there's depth now. We have 2 really good offensive linemen that we picked up that are going to be just immediately difference makers if they get the opportunity to play. And again, we don't know what the future holds for Ryan Kelly as his last year on the deal, but there's a good opportunity that the Colts are going to be able to pick up right where they left off as a dominant offensive line unit that they're going to be able to move forward going forward. So I'm excited. I think it's really, really good news that Braden Smith is coming back, that he feels better than ever. And again, that he didn't allow a sack on that right side, which is, I think, an incredible deal, especially when you have a guy who's not as mobile like Gardner Minshew on the as quarterback. And obviously Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss had good seasons. Like, they had really good seasons dealing with all the stuff they dealt with. So I'm excited to see where the Colts go. But this is great news on the offensive line front as we continue to look forward to the new season and what it looks like.